So, hey, this is Jordan, and I wanted to talk about language today because in the last video that I did about books, I was asked about potentially doing a video sort of going over my library language by language and talking about the things that I'm interested in and the things that I'm reading. And I definitely want to do that. But before I do, I want to talk about why I got into language in the first place. And it's a bit of a long story. And I would say that there were three major things that sort of got me interested in the whole topic in the first place. So the first was when I was 6 years old, I went to my grandmother's house and played the video game Final Fantasy for the NES. And this might seem like a strange thing to get a kid interested in language, but I was a reader. I was reading, Ninja Turtles comics and things like that, but I definitely like to read. But Final Fantasy was the first video game I played that really had a kind of a reading component. It had a story that was very heavily based, of course, on mythology. It had all these fantastic beasts and dragons and monsters, and I loved the game. I loved the story, but most of all, I loved the monsters, and I loved their names. They were very exotic, very unusual. I hadn't heard half of them. I certainly didn't know how to pronounce half of them. Uh, Especially the ogres. I actually thought that they were ogres, uh, which still makes me laugh to this day. But uh, they had things like Tiamat and the Kraken and ogres and imps, and uh, I didn't know what any of these things even were, and I had to immediately go and look them up. It's the first time I really started using a dictionary, and it kind of on some level got me fascinated about where do these words come from, where do these concepts originate. And of course, I was pretty young. I didn't really follow up on it at that point. But a little bit later, I'd say in upper elementary school or middle school, I don't remember exactly when, I was in the school library and I found a book on Norse mythology. And that was a pretty life changing event because uh, I was into mythology already. I loved the stories of Perseus and Theseus, and I loved the kind of mythical beasts like the Gorgons and Pegasus and things like this. But for some reason, the Norse myths just really resonated with me. The Norse gods, Thor and Loki and Odin and the whole gang, seemed more relatable. The myths seemed more down to earth, more human, and for whatever reason, it just really got me interested in the whole topic. And it was the first time that I ever really paid attention to the fact that the book I was reading was translated. It got me thinking about, the idea that the language that I was reading was carried over from a language that I had no familiarity with, and it's sort of got me fascinated in that whole process and what that really meant. So a few years later, when I was a sophomore in high school, we read The Fellowship of the Ring. Of course, the first volume in the Lord of the Rings, and this obviously changed my life forever. It got me started in this whole process. As soon as I read the book, I loved it. I loved the idea that that this world was populated with all these different beings and cultures, and that they had different languages. And I didn't fully understand it at the time, of course, but as I started to kind of study it and follow up on it, I came to appreciate just how much love and care Tolkien put into giving his world and the cultures within it an identity. It really distinguished the various groups, from another, and from one another, and so these three things all combined ultimately kind of led to my decision to start studying Old Norse when I was a senior in high school, and then to start taking Latin in college, which was a great experience. I had two great professors, both of whom really changed my life and taught me so much about language. So ultimately, because of all these major experiences in my life, I came to appreciate language from a standpoint of curiosity and as a student, but primarily from an artistic standpoint, a creative standpoint. Someone like Tolkien, I think that language is a very fundamental expression of our humanity. It gives rise to our entire sense of culture and individuality. And as a lover of literature and especially of poetry, I think for anybody interested in poetry, you've got to be fascinated on some level by language, right? If you're a native English speaker and you love Shakespeare, you're going to want to get to know all about the forms in which he wrote, about the sonnet and about iambic pentameter and blank verse, and the way that stress-based, kind of accentual poetry works in the English language, and the same goes for any other, mythology or poetry or culture in which you're interested, whether it's history or a theological interest or whatever else. So anyway, sorry for all the rambling, but that's basically what got me into it, and ultimately, it's a love of words, and I think anybody that gets interested in languages, that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is this realization that words have a power, that a single word has the power to conjure up an image of a dragon or an intricate philosophical concept, that words have their own history, they have roots, and even if we don't consciously comprehend them, they're there in much the same way that that evolution is a process, and that it leaves imprints, it leaves remnants of that process, even in modern organisms. So anyway, please let me know what you think. Let me know what got you interested in language, what languages you're particularly fascinated by, and what got you into the whole process in the first place. And just, comment, let me know what you think. And I guess until the next time, I'll just say to take care, and I will talk to you later.